Today on the Why series, we're going to talk about fighting. Specifically, why fighting is not a good solution to conflict. Why do you think fighting may not be the best solution to conflict? Pause the video here and discuss with your class. Welcome back. Let's see if the things that you came up with as a class matches up with some of the things we're going to talk about on the show. As with most things, in order to fully understand something, we need to break it down into smaller parts and examine it more closely. So first, let's talk about what conflict is. A conflict is a serious disagreement or argument where both parties are equally invested into their side of the argument. Let's think of an example. Jacqueline is mad at Gabriella because she saw a Snapchat that Gabby had sent Marco saying how annoying Jacqueline was. Jacqueline confronts Gabby at school by saying, "So you think I'm annoying? Well, at least I change my clothes every now and again." This was said in front of a bunch of other people, and now Gabby and Jacqueline are in a conflict. Why do you think Jacqueline did this? Does it somehow fix what Gabby said to Marco? Jacqueline most likely did this because she was hurt that one of her classmates thinks her to be annoying. And there's a saying that hurt people hurt people. The idea of that is that someone who is hurting themselves seem to get some relief from making other people hurt in the same way. The reason that this often has to do with our longing for empathy from others. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. In the mind of Jacqueline, she wanted Gabby to know what she was feeling. And Jacqueline chose to do that by saying something mean to Gabby. Now, just like Jacqueline wanted, Gabby is hurt. But if it's what Jacqueline wants, then why is it making the situation worse? Gabby now knows how it feels to have something mean said about you. But Gabby's natural response is not to now have empathy for Jacqueline. What do you think Gabby wants to do? Go ahead and pause the video for a moment and talk about what Gabby wants to do. Gabby probably wants to get Jacqueline back. She doesn't know how Jacqueline found out about what she said on Snapchat, but Jacqueline said something in front of everyone. And this particular issue of not always having the nicest, newest clothes is a sore spot for Gabby because her family cannot afford new clothes all the time. And since their washing machine is broke down, they have to make special trips to the laundromat, which cannot happen all the time because they have to get a ride with their neighbor since they don't have a working car. But all of this information is deeply personal, and she's definitely not going to hand it over to the person that just used their words to hurt Gabby. So Gabby does not communicate. Instead, she goes a step further. She is so hurt and angry at Jacqueline that her brain goes into what's called the lizard brain. The lizard brain is the part of the brain that responds to serious crisis. You've heard of it as the fight or flight response. It's what our ancestors used to stay alive. But in today's world, not everything is life-threatening, but our brain doesn't know that. So Gabby is in her lizard brain, and the response that she goes to is fight. So she takes a swing at Jacqueline. Now Jacqueline is hurt, but not just emotionally. Now she hurts physically. Not to mention all the pressure from the students around her. Will she look like a weak person if she doesn't fight back? Yeah, sure, the teacher will be disappointed, but she only has this teacher for this year. She'll probably have a new teacher next year, but these kids will follow her all the way through graduation. Not to mention, that hurt. And now Jacqueline is in her lizard brain and fighting back. This cycle will most likely continue until an adult intervenes. Do you want to know a secret? Oftentimes, kids, and even some adults, are hoping for someone to intervene. They don't want to look weak in front of their peers. But if the school staff intervene and separate the two students, then they have no choice but to stop. Now, this isn't always the case, but it's more common than you'd think. That's why students will ask another student to hold them back. They don't want to seem afraid of fighting, but they'd also prefer not to get into a fight. So let's go back to Jacqueline and Gabby. At this point, the teacher has separated them, and they are both sent to the office to fill out their side of the story. And here's what is interesting. In both of their minds, they were in the right. In Jacqueline's mind, Gabby clearly started it by telling everyone in her Snapchat contacts that Jacqueline was annoying. Not to mention, Gabby threw the first punch, so she started the fight too. In Jacqueline's mind, this is all Gabby's fault. But at the same time, Gabby feels like she is completely justified in throwing that first punch because what Jacqueline said was in front of everyone, and it was about an issue that was an extremely low blow. She has very little control about having enough clothes to wear on a weekly basis, and even though Jacqueline didn't know about that, Gabby feels completely justified in her actions. It is all Jacqueline's fault. Go ahead and pause the video and talk about, as a third-party member, who you think is at fault. What did you guys come up with? If you said both, then I would agree with you. What Gabby said on Snapchat was wrong and hurtful. Not only was it gossiping, but it was a statement without context. And it was probably a response to some emotion she felt about Jacqueline at the time. Gabby might not find Jacqueline annoying all the time, but at that moment she did, and so she made an impulse decision to tell someone, or in this case, Marco. Oftentimes when we vent in a format where we're looking at a screen and typing things in online, it's easier for us to say what we're feeling without consideration of how it will be taken. This is how a lot of cyberbullying takes place. If you talk to any famous YouTuber or TikToker, they will say how some people comment extremely mean things on their posts and videos. These same people may not say the same things to the person's face, but from the safe vantage point of their phone or computer, that they'll say it and post it and not think twice about it. This is how Gabby was wrong. You never know who's going to see a message or a post, and it's a good idea to stop and think how this might be taken from the person that is being talked about. If you wouldn't say it to their face, probably a good sign not to say it online. Now, I think that Jacqueline is equally to blame. Even though Gabby's thing was not fair, Jacqueline premeditated the meanest thing that she could think of to hurt Gabby's feelings. Now, Jacqueline was hurt, and her intentions were to show how hurt she was, but one thing that Jacqueline forgot, that by seeking out to make Gabby hurt in front of her peers, backed Gabby into a corner that made the brain recognize it as a survival situation. You might think Gabby is also in the wrong for taking the first punch, and you would be partially correct. And although Gabby can take some of the blame, not all of it falls on her. Do you remember me talking about the lizard brain? This part of your brain is called the amygdala. It is wired to do whatever it takes to survive. When someone is angry enough, there is very little that they can do to control themselves. Now, this isn't an excuse, and it most definitely won't get you out of charges in court, but it is definitely a factor in the situation with Jacqueline and Gabby. Here's an analogy. Imagine you're sitting on top of a hill with your shiny red wagon. You decide to get in your wagon at the top of the hill and ride down. You push off and start rolling down the hill. At first, you start off real slow, and then gradually, your speed picks up faster and faster, and there's a certain point where you have little to no control over the wagon. You have accepted the responsibility and consequences for riding down the hill just by making the initial decision of sitting down in the wagon and pushing off down the hill. That is like your brain. You have the choice on getting in the wagon and pushing off to head down the hill. But at a certain point, your brain's going to take over, and it's going to be extremely difficult for you to retake control. So what are some ways you can do that? A couple weeks back, we talked about being proactive. Here's a couple of ways you can do that. In the example of the wagon, you could be proactive by trying not to find yourself in the situation that might lead to you not being in control. or planning ahead by installing some sort of brake on the wagon so that you can slow down and be more in control. Now, in real life, that could mean avoiding situations where you have gotten really upset in the past. This can be certain friend groups, certain social media usage, and so on. But you may not always have control over that. It might be a classmate, and you can't just switch classes. So that's where you go into the breaks, coming up with strategies to help you calm down. One of the best strategies for calming down is taking deep breaths. I would like you to pause the video right now and put your hand on your heart. Take 3 deep breaths and see if you notice your heart rate decreasing. Did it work? I have a Fitbit watch that tracks my heart rate all the time, and I just took deep breaths while you paused the video, and my heart rate dropped from 96 down to 75 beats per minute. In less than 30 seconds, I was able to signal my brain to relax and give me back control. So let's go back to our question. Why isn't fighting a good solution to conflict? I would say it's because it starts both sides of the conflict on a cycle of having to one-up the hurt of the other party until it gets out of hand and people get seriously hurt. Now, this is the end of the video, but I want you to think about this one thing. What are some steps you can take to remove yourself from the top of hills or installing brakes on your red wagon to help make sure that you are in control of you? We'll see you next time on the Why series, where we talk about the why behind our expectations for you. Goodbye.